I found my grandson and his baby living in a tent behind an abandoned motel. The smell of rain mixed with smoke, his hands shaking as he tried to shield the child from the cold. When he saw me, he froze like time itself stopped. He'd been told all his life that I was dead, and in that moment I realized my own son had erased me to hide his sins. I took them home on my private jet that night, not because I was rich, but because I couldn't bear watching another generation suffer for his lies. When I finally told my grandson the truth about his father, he broke down. The tears weren't just his, they were mine too, 3 decades late. But before I share my story with you, I'd love to know you're here with me. Drop a simple hi in the comments so I know you're listening, or tell me where you're watching from. I love to see how far my story can reach. Thank you. And now, let me tell you everything. My name is Rowena Lark Hayes, and this is the story of how I found the only family I had left buried under lies, guilt, and a tent soaked in rain. If stories like this move you, please hit subscribe. It helps more than you think. Sometimes one act of listening can change everything. 30 years. That's how long I've lived without hearing the sound of a breaking heart. I thought I'd forgotten it until the photograph slid under the lamplight, a man holding a baby in front of a torn blue tent. The air in my penthouse felt colder, thinner. Santa Fe sprawled below orange and gold in the dying light, the desert stretching like an old scar. My coffee had gone cold hours ago. On my desk, the black folder sat untouched for 3 days, light as air but heavier than truth. 6 pages and 1 photograph hand-delivered by Serena Vale, a private investigator who knew better than to ask questions. I pushed it aside every morning, pretending I was busy with other things, committee meetings, property reviews, all those sterile tasks that fill a widow's day when there's no one left to listen. I finally opened it. The first page gave me the name I'd half hoped, half feared to see: Asher Hayes, age 29, unemployed, residence Canyon Flats, Tucson. Beside it, a note-dependent minor child, Lila Hayes, female, 16 months, recurrent respiratory infection. I turned the page. Medical scan. Discharged from ER due to lack of insurance. The words blurred. My husband Harland once said, "A good house can save a life." I stared at the photo again, the man soaked in rain clutching the baby. In the background, a crumbling sign read, "Raven's Rest." Harland had built that motel chain from nothing. He'd believed shelter could mend people. Seeing that name again felt like a hand reaching up from the past. The report continued, subject's father, Galen Hayes, mother, Brenda Calloway Hayes. Estranged. I felt my stomach tighten. My son, the man who took everything and left his father to die by an empty safe. I remembered the night I found Harlan slumped in that leather chair, his hand frozen over his chest. The safe door swung open empty. The police called it a heart attack. I knew better. The next line of the report hit harder than the rest. Subject Asher Hayes was told grandmother Rowena Lark Hayes is deceased. I pressed my fingers against the page until they trembled. So Galen had erased me completely from history, from family, from the boy's mind. If that was true, then I hadn't just lost a son. I'd been buried alive in memory. I leaned back, my reflection staring back from the glass wall. The desert wind brushed against the windows, the sound like breath on glass. Outside, the sunset bled into red dust. I could almost hear Harlan's voice. "Don't build walls, row. Build futures." He said that the day we broke ground on Havenwood Estates. I whispered back to the empty room, "You were right. Houses keep breathing even after the people don't." I called my assistant. "Carmela, get the jet ready at dawn. Tucson. Tell Dr. Nolan to be on standby. Bring the emergency kit." She hesitated. "For how long, ma'am?" "As long as it takes." When the call ended, I sat in silence, tracing my fingers along Harlan's old wooden ruler, his initials still burned into the grain. He'd believed decency could be measured in inches, that a solid beam and an honest day's work could hold a soul together. I hadn't believed that in years, but tonight I could almost feel his hand guiding mine again. As I turned off the lamp, my phone buzzed a single message from an unlisted number. "Don't dig up the past, Rowena." I froze. For years, I'd lived above suspicion, above emotion, above risk, but the folder had cracked that ice. I looked out at the desert one last time and whispered, "Tomorrow I'll call my name again. Grandma." Then I dialed my driver. Levi picked me up at 6. The wind outside pressed against the glass, a warning or a promise. The rain had started before dawn, a thin silver mist crawling across the Arizona highway. By the time we reached Tucson, the sky hung low, heavy with dust and memory. Levi parked beneath the I-10 overpass where Canyon Flats began a sprawl of blue tarps, broken pallets, and the smell of wet cardboard. The kind of place society forgets until the news cameras show up. I stepped out, umbrella trembling in the wind heels, sinking into the mud. "Stay by the car," I told Levi. "Keep the engine running." I followed the sound of a child coughing soft but sharp enough to pierce through the rain. There, beneath a bridge pillar, stood a tent, patched with tape water seeping through the seams. I called out Asher Hayes. A man turned sharply, clutching a small bundle to his chest. His eyes were dark, suspicious, worn from sleepless nights. He tightened his grip around the child. "Who are you?" I lowered the umbrella, letting the rain soak into my hair. "I'm Rowena Lark Hayes," I said quietly. "Your grandmother." He stared at me as if I'd spoken a language he didn't understand. "My grandmother's dead," he said flatly. I took a breath. "That's what your father wanted you to believe." The baby stirred, coughing again. Her skin glistened with fever. Without thinking, I slipped off my coat and wrapped it around them both. "She's burning up," I said. "Let me take you somewhere warm. 1 hour, a doctor. Then you decide what comes next." He hesitated. His voice broke with suspicion. "What do you want in return?" I met his gaze. "Nothing you're not willing to give. Just put her first." Rain drummed harder against the concrete. I could feel him fighting his instincts to run to trust to collapse. "I've been lied to," before he muttered. "People show up with promises and papers, and I lose more each time." I nodded slowly. "I'm not here with papers. I'm here with a car, a doctor, and a warm room." He finally moved, adjusting the blanket around Lila. The girl's small fingers reached out, touching the edge of my sleeve. That tiny gesture undid something in both of us. One night, he said, his voice barely audible, "That's all." Levi appeared through the rain umbrella held high. "Ma'am," he asked. I turned to Asher. "Follow me." He hesitated again, scanning the darkness. Far beyond the row of tents, a black sedan idled for a moment, headlights flickering before disappearing into the traffic. Levi caught it too. "Rented plates," he whispered. "Someone's watching." I nodded, deciding not to head to the hotel I'd booked. "We're changing plans," I said. In the car, the warmth hit us like a wave. Asher kept Lila close his shoulder, still tense eyes darting to every sound. She soon drifted off against his chest, cheeks flushed, but breathing easier. I texted Carmela new destination. "Cancel previous hotel." She replied with a question mark. I didn't answer. Asher broke the silence. "I still don't understand why you came." I watched the rain streak down the window. "Because I built houses for people to have somewhere safe to go, and then I let my own family end up in the cold." He looked away. "You can't fix 30 years with a jet and a doctor." "I know," I said, "but we can start with tonight." He said nothing more. The hum of the engine filled the car steady as a heartbeat. I reached into my bag, handed him a small phone. "This has only 3 numbers, mine, Carmela's, and Dr. Nolan's. Keep it. If you need help, call." He turned it over in his hand, confused, suspicious, but didn't refuse. Outside, the storm grew heavier. The city lights blurred behind the curtain of rain. I looked at his reflection in the glass, so much of Harland in that face, the same jawline, the same quiet strength under exhaustion. Lila stirred, then went still again, breathing soft. One night, Asher repeated. I nodded. One night for now. As the car turned off the highway, I thought of the houses Harland once designed, each one with 2 exits, one for fire, one for safety. I'd always admired that. Tonight we needed both. I've always liked blueprints with escape routes, I whispered to myself, and tonight we'll need more than one. The rain drowned the rest of my words, carrying them into the desert dark. By dawn, the rain over Tucson had turned to fog. The air smelled faintly of dust and disinfectant as we stepped into Dr. Nolan's small clinic. The waiting room was quiet except for the rasping sound of Lila's breath. She lay in Asher's arms, cheeks flushed, her small hand clutching the edge of his sleeve. Dr. Nolan examined her gently, his voice calm and reassuring. Respiratory infection, not pneumonia. We'll start antibiotics. Keep her warm and hydrated. He showed Asher how to use the tiny dropper for her medicine. I could tell by the way Asher memorized every instruction that he had been alone in survival mode for far too long. Outside, the sun was a pale disk behind the haze. Levi waited by the car umbrella in hand. Asher held Lila close as we drove to the airstrip. The private terminal stood quiet, a white jet gleaming under the desert light. I could feel his hesitation as we boarded, his eyes darting across the polished cabin, the neat rows of leather seats, the steward's soft greeting. To him, this wasn't comfort. It was another world, one that had shut its doors long ago. Once seated, I said softly, "You'll find warm towels in the side compartment. And food if you're hungry." He nodded but didn't move until Lila's breathing steadied. The hum of the engines filled the silence between us. I looked out the window and said, "Your grandfather built his first house with his own hands. Just a small place in Taos made of pine. He cut himself. He sanded every step twice, said he wanted it smooth enough for a child to crawl on." Asher didn't answer. He fed Lila a bottle, his hands trembling not from fear but exhaustion. I watched the way he checked her breathing between every sip. When she fell asleep, he stared out the window as if trying to remember what calm looked like. Above the clouds, the light turned silver, washing the cabin in a soft glow. It reminded me of the mornings Harlan used to sit at the kitchen table, drawing houses in silence before the workers arrived. I reached into my bag and handed Asher a small key ring. "This is for the Casa Lark Ranch just outside Taos. You'll have the south room. It locks from the inside. There's a nursery next door. No one will disturb you." He looked at the keys as though they weighed more than metal. "Why are you doing this?" he asked. "Because you and that child deserve a door that closes at night," I said. While he focused on Lila, I opened my tablet and read a message from Carmela. Attached were scans of financial records, old transactions routed through anonymous accounts. Some led directly to a line of budget motels in Arizona, one of them Raven's Rest. I zoomed in on the signature. The handwriting was too familiar, the same flourish on the G. Galens. My chest tightened not from surprise, but from recognition. Then Asher's phone buzzed. He frowned. The phone was brand new, a clean number that only connected to me, Carmela, and Dr. Nolan. He read the message and stiffened. I saw the reflection in the window. "Don't trust her." He looked up sharply. I met his gaze and said nothing. Levi noticed too. "Ma'am," he murmured from across the aisle, "the SIM's secure. No public listing, meaning the breach came from somewhere close." I texted Carmela quickly. "Check security at both ends. Vet the medical team. And Serena Vale." The message delivered, but no reply came. My throat felt dry. Betrayal has a smell, you recognize it even before you can name it. Still, I forced my tone calm. "First things first," I told myself. "The child gets well. Everything else can wait." Hours later, the desert of New Mexico came into view, stretching endlessly below. As the jet began to descend, I closed my eyes, breathing through the hum of the engines. The city grew smaller, its lights like embers fading under the morning sun. For the first time in decades, I felt something like oxygen return to my lungs. "Home," I whispered. "It isn't where the roof stands. It's where people stop shivering. Then my phone vibrated again. A new message from Serena. You need to see the original purchase file for Raven's Rest. The signature from 30 years ago might not be Harlan's. My breath caught. The past was stirring again, and this time it wasn't done with me. The road to Taos curled through the mountains lined with pine and the faint shimmer of melting snow. The air grew thinner, cleaner, like something that hadn't been touched in years. Casa Lark Ranch appeared through the fog, a house built of cedar and stone, standing at the edge of a wide meadow. Harlan's house. The front porch sagged slightly on one side, but the window still caught the light, as if waiting to breathe again. When we arrived, I showed Asher around in silence. The floors creaked under our steps. The scent of pine and dust clung to the air. In the hallway hung Harlan's old blueprints, yellowed by time. He drew every line by hand, I said. No computers back then, just graphite and faith. Asher nodded, running his fingers over the frame. He didn't say much, he rarely did, but I saw the way he studied the angles, the way he took in each detail like a man cataloging what safety might look like. I gave him the south-facing room, the one with morning light that spills across the floorboards. The nursery next door still held the cradle Harlan built decades ago. You can lock the doors from inside, I told him. Privacy's a form of peace. He only replied, "We won't be any trouble." That evening, the wind carried a chill across the valley. I stood at the kitchen window watching dusk settle on the water. Upstairs, I heard a sound, a low voice humming. At first, I thought it was the wind through the rafters. Then I realized it was Asher, singing softly to Layla. The tune stopped me cold. It was the same melody Harlan used to hum, while sketching plans, a simple wordless tune that sounded like memory itself. I stood there in the dark hallway, one hand on the wall, to steady myself, listening. It felt like the past had found its echo. Later that night, I couldn't sleep. I went down to the archive room beside Harlan's old study. The shelves were lined with decades of contracts, designs, and property deeds. I pulled out the Raven's Rest file to cross-check the copies Carmela sent. The paper edges were too clean, too new. Someone had replaced them. The signatures Harlan's name looked right at first glance, but under the lamp, I saw the ink bled differently, the pressure inconsistent. A forgery. I called Carmela immediately. When was the last security audit for this archive? She hesitated. 2 weeks ago when you were in Santa Fe, but the log shows one entry after hours using a deactivated passcode, whose I asked, though I already knew. It was an old card under Galen Hayes. System never flagged it because it predates our new software. I gripped the edge of the desk until my knuckles went white. He was watching us, even now. I ended the call and sat back, the silence pressing against my chest. Upstairs, the faint sound of Lila's breathing came through the baby monitor. For the first time, I felt the weight of what I'd brought into this house, not just a child and her father, but the shadow of a man who refused to let go of what he'd stolen. Outside, the lake shimmered under the moon. My reflection looked older than I remembered. The night air smelled of pine and snowmelt. I thought of Harlan again, how he used to say a house was alive as long as someone loved it. Maybe he was right. The ranch had been quiet for too long, waiting for footsteps, laughter, warmth. And now that life had returned, danger followed with it. I whispered to the dark water, a home can be rebuilt, but trust if it collapses again, it may never rise. For now I would keep the truth to myself. Timing mattered more than truth. Some foundations had to set before they could hold the weight of revelation. The wind picked up, carrying that old humming through the hallway once more, soft and fragile, like the house itself, learning how to breathe again. Morning light spilled across the kitchen table at Casa Lark Ranch, catching the faint scratches Harlan once carved into the wood. Lila babbled quietly beside Asher, playing with a spoon. It had been months since that night under the overpass, and yet every so often I still caught the echo of rain in my dreams. The girl was strong now, healthy cheeks, steady laughter, and Asher, though thinner than he should have been, carried himself differently. Less like a man running, more like one trying to build something. I decided it was time. There's a position open at Larkin Haven, I said. Construction division, project management assistant. He looked up slowly. You're offering me a job? No, I said. I'm offering you a chance to earn one. He didn't know it yet, but I arranged for his application to go through normal procedures under a different last name. I wanted him tested as a man, not as my grandson. At the headquarters in Albuquerque, the glass tower rose 24 stories sunlight, sliding off its mirrored walls. Employees passed through the revolving doors without glancing up. In that building, legacy didn't matter, output did. I watched from my office as Asher went through the interview rounds. He didn't mention me. He didn't need to. His posture said everything alert contained cautious. He was hired as an assistant to Cyrus Hale, the most relentless site manager we had. Hale was a man who measured loyalty by sweat, not blood. The first weeks were rough. Asher kept his head down, arriving before dawn, staying past dark. He helped unload lumber-sorted tools, made sure the crews had water in the heat. Some of the men whispered behind his back. They'd found out he'd once lived in a tent. Construction crews talk fast when someone doesn't belong. He ignored them, working harder instead. When I visited the site unannounced, I saw him sitting outside a container office reading design plans while Lila slept beside him in her stroller. The look on his face stopped me, the same steady concentration Harlan used to have when measuring floorboards. It wasn't ambition, it was purpose. A week later, a delivery discrepancy hit the project missing steel beams numbers off by hundreds. The report landed on Cyrus's desk and fingers pointed straight to Asher. He'd logged the materials. The foreman said the counts were wrong. I stayed silent, though every instinct in me wanted to step in. I needed to know what kind of man he truly was. He didn't protest. He asked for the shipment logs, compared them with the supplier invoices, drove to the yard himself. 2 days later, he returned with proof falsified delivery slips from the supplier manipulated by a middleman named Brad Cutter, who'd been pocketing the difference. Asher presented everything to Cyrus in neat order, without a trace of pride. Cyrus called me that evening. The kid's got guts, he said, and a brain. When the Desert Bloom Village project began, Asher was assigned a key role handling budgets and field reports. The site sat on the outskirts of Santa Rosa, rows of half-built homes meant for factory workers. It was the kind of project Harlan would have loved. I watched Asher grow into it, calm under pressure, firm with foremen, gentle with his crew. One afternoon, he came into my office holding a folder. "There's something strange in the files," he said. A reference to an older model dated 20 years ago, Raven's Rest. My hand tightened on my pen. "Probably an old development template," I said lightly, "a leftover from your grandfather's era." He nodded, accepting my answer, but I could see the question in his eyes. That night, as the sun fell behind the desert, we ate together at the ranch. Lila threw mashed potatoes onto the floor, and he laughed, the sound surprising both of us. I asked quietly, "If you had to choose your name or your freedom, what would it be?" He didn't hesitate. "I'd rather build my own house than inherit one full of ghosts." I smiled, though the ache behind my ribs told me how much he would soon have to unlearn. I cleared the table while he carried Lila upstairs. Through the open window, I heard the faint hum of his voice, soft, patient, the same tune that once filled this house. I knew then I was right not to tell him yet. Some truths need foundation before they can stand. 3 years passed. The ranch bloomed again. New paint-repaired beams, laughter where silence used to be. Asher had risen to deputy project director at Larkin Haven. Lila was now 4, bright and curious, already drawing crooked houses on scrap paper. I sometimes caught Asher watching her with a look halfway between joy and fear, as if love itself was a fragile thing. The company's 50th anniversary came that spring. The headquarters was transformed into an exhibit hall, photographs, sketches, and models tracing every decade of our work. I stood beside Asher in the gallery, both of us silent, before a black and white portrait of Harland Hayes. The resemblance was undeniable. The same jaw, same quiet resolve. Asher tilted his head. "Who was he?" he asked. I said softly, "The man who laid every cornerstone we still stand on." He smiled faintly. "He looks like someone I used to know." Later that evening, while the others toasted and the music swelled, I saw Asher step away, drawn toward the archival display. Minutes passed. When he returned, his face was pale. "There's a ledger missing from the exhibit room," he said. "I found it behind one of the panels." He handed me the folder. My breath caught. Inside were the original financial records, ink faded but legible. Every page bore one signature, Galen Hayes. He looked at me, confusion and dawning horror mixing in his eyes. "Who is he?" I could have lied again, but lies were what built this wreckage. "He's my son," I said quietly. "And your father." The silence that followed felt like an earthquake. He took a step back, shaking his head. "No, that's impossible." "He told you I was dead," I said, "because he wanted to bury the truth with me." His hands trembled as he flipped through the pages. "He's the reason we lost everything," I continued. "Your grandfather died the night Galen emptied our accounts. He didn't kill him with a gun, but with betrayal." Asher's voice cracked. "So all this time you knew who I was?" I nodded. "From the moment I saw you holding Lila. But you needed to stand on your own before the name meant anything." He dropped the folder to the floor. "You should have told me. You should have trusted me." He turned and left before I could find words that might reach him. By the time I reached the parking lot, he was gone. He'd taken Lila and left his phone behind. I waited in the dark foyer until midnight, the echoes of the celebration still faint in the distance. Then Levi called. "Ma'am," he said, breathless. "Someone broke into the ranch. The archive room's on fire." We drove through the night. Flames flickered against the windows when we arrived, smoke curling from the back wing of the house. Levi was limping, blood on his sleeve. "Caught him pouring accelerant," he said. "Couldn't see his face." We managed to save the main structure, but the air smelled of burned paper and loss. On the doorstep lay a single scrap of paper, words scrawled in black ink. "Don't dig up the past." I sat in the living room long after the firefighters left, watching the smoke fade into morning light. I thought losing Harland was the end of pain, I whispered to the empty room. But losing Asher's trust, that's the true sentence. When the sun rose, I called Serena Vale. She still owed me a few favors. Within days, she traced the Denver investment accounts. The money trail ended where it began, with Galen Hayes still alive, still moving funds under false names. "He's pulling the last of it," she said. "If you want to stop him, now's the time." I closed my eyes. "Not yet," I said. "My grandson deserves to see it with his own eyes." That night, I sat by the piano. The keys were worn, the wood dry from years of silence. I struck a single note, then another. The melody filled the house. Harland's tune, soft and steady, the song that once built a life. I texted Asher one sentence. "If you want to know who your father truly is, come home tomorrow morning. I'll tell you everything." The music drifted through the rooms, reaching the hallway where Lila's toys still lay scattered. I let it play until my hands stopped shaking. The house smelled faintly of smoke, but beneath it there was pine. Always pine. The scent of something that refuses to die. Monday morning, the top floor of Larkenhaven Tower was bright with desert sun. The boardroom glass held a portrait of Harland Hayes and the line, "He loved." "We build the place where life begins again." Cameras waited, suits murmured. Carmela stood by the wall with a clipboard, and I felt the old ache settle steady as a heartbeat. I opened the meeting and kept it short. "This company stands on 3 things I said. honesty, fair dealing, the courage to start over. I looked down the long table to where Asher sat. He looked composed, but the hurt from last night still lived in his eyes. Effective today, I said the role of Chief Executive Officer of Lark and Haven belongs to Asher Hayes. The room rose in applause. He started to stand. Then the doors swung open. Security moved, but I lifted a hand. Galen walked in with gray at his temples and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Elena trailed him careful, makeup-weary posture. The room went silent. "My son is CEO," Galen said lightly. "I came to congratulate him." Asher pushed back his chair color, draining from his face. I kept my voice even. "You came because you heard there was something left to take." He tried the soft route first. "It's time for family to be family," he said. Elena added, "We just want to see our granddaughter." I stood my ground. 30 years ago, you didn't use a weapon. I said to Galen, "You used hunger. You emptied your father's accounts and left him to hold an empty safe while his heart failed. Then you told your son I was dead, so your story wouldn't have a witness." Asher's gaze flicked between us, the floor tilting under him. Galen's charm thinned. "Your husband handed you everything he snapped. I only took what was mine. You took trust, I said. You taught a child to live inside a lie." Elena's composure cracked. "I signed papers," she whispered. "Transfers for Raven's Rest. I thought it was temporary." She looked at Asher. "I was wrong." Galen laughed once sharp. "You want details? Your grandfather didn't die at the safe. He was alive when I left. He said he wanted to be alone." The words fell like gravel. I laid a folder on the table and opened it to the copies we'd had certified in court. "These are the transactions," I said. "Every path ends at a Denver account you still control." The room watched him go still. Asher stood. He looked at the portrait of Harlan, then back at me, then at the staff who had followed his work for years without knowing his blood or his past. "I won't take $1 from the damage he made," he said. "Any equity or bonuses attached to my name will be moved to a fund for workforce housing. Put roofs where there weren't any. Let that be the only inheritance." The breath in the room changed. People straightened. Even the reporters lowered their cameras for a heartbeat. I faced Galen. "You spent a lifetime reaching into other people's pockets," I said. "But there's one thing you can't reach, the decency that survived you." He sagged into a chair, small for the first time in my memory. Elena asked to leave. Security stepped forward. I nodded. Restraining orders would be filed by end of day, and they knew it. I signed the transfer, making Asher's appointment official. As we stepped into the hallway, the sound changed. Rain struck the windows, soft and insistent, the first real storm Santa Fe had seen in months. I thought of roofs and thresholds and the old promise in Harlan's voice. Some rain doesn't wash dirt away. Some rain just says the season has turned. Asher didn't speak. He simply reached for my hand and held it, and we walked into the new weather together. 2 months later, the valley wore autumn like a light coat. The sky over Taos was thin blue, the air clean with pine and cold. Lila chased her shadow around the pond's edge, tossing pebbles and watching rings move outward until they disappeared into the bright. On the porch table, next to a jar of nails, lay the plans for Lark Haven. Residences, compact homes with porches that face each other. Sidewalks wide enough for strollers, kitchens meant for Sunday pancakes. The first project with Asher's name at the top line. The first project to carry Harlan's. A lot had shifted in a short span. The papers told the story that should have been told years ago. The Denver money trail made daylight, Galen gone across state lines, Elena back to a mother who would let her grieve the choices she made. The board ratified what the rain had already declared. Asher was CEO. I stayed on as an advisor the way a steady hand stays on the back of a chair when a child learns to stand. His first act was simple and loud. Every home in Larkhaven residences came with rent support built into the deed for people who work with their hands, nurses' aides, warehouse crews, carpenters' daycare staff. At night, he brought the plans home and set them on the piano lid he'd repaired himself. Sometimes he played a few bars of the old melody, not as a relic, but as a way to keep time with the work. Lila started school nearby and brought me drawings of houses with a big front window shaped like a heart. She said that's where the warm comes in. One afternoon, I cleaned the archive room the firefighters had saved. Tucked behind a stack of rolled maps, I found an envelope sealed with brittle tape. Harlan's handwriting was plain and stubborn. I sat on the floor dust on my palms and read, "If anyone follows me, I hope it's the one who doesn't fear beginning again from wreckage." I set the letter on my lap and looked at the newest site plans Asher had, without knowing revived one of Harlan's layouts and fixed its weak corners. The line between them felt straight as a beam. I thought about handing him the letter that night, then put it back. Some things a person should discover with his own hands. Some doors mean more when you open them yourself. By evening, the light went copper. I stood at the window and watched Lila toss another stone. The circles widened and softened until the water was plain again. Every house has a way of breathing. This one had held its breath for 3 decades. Today it drew in air and let it go without shaking. I heard Harlan in my head, as clear as a voice in the next room. A house isn't only shelter from weather. It's where people relearn the feeling of being alive. The next morning, I signed papers to create the Harlan Foundation, a promise in ink for families one layoff away from a tent. Levi carved the sign that hangs by the porch steps. Built once, loved forever. When Asher came up from the fence line, he brushed wood dust off his hands and said, "We'll finish the first homes tomorrow. I want you to cut the ribbon." I shook my head. "No, that's yours. Let the one who starts be the one who finishes." He smiled like a man who understands lineage isn't a chain but a bridge. Later, I sat in the old chair by the window, sun warming the boards, listening to Asher teach Lila how to say grandma without rushing it. My voice, when it finally came, was steadier than I expected. I used to think legacy was property structures, a name pressed into brass. After everything I know better, legacy is a child who grows up never learning the taste of cold under a bridge. It's a key that turns easily for hands that once shook. It's a house that keeps breathing because the people inside it do.